Welcome to Bog's Hotline, your regular Mythic Plus Q&A. Today, we talk about how to begin pushing into high keys. We get tanking advice from Shawrus, who was last season's rank 3 tank in the NA region, how to construct your personality around your in-game accomplishments, and more. If you would like your question to be answered in the next episode, drop it down below in the comments. Starting us off, our first question from Rafael Henrique Diaz 7194. Apologies if I butchered the name. Is 3K hard to get? The short answer is, if you're playing actively and you're looking to improve, absolutely not. It's a 100% achievable for all players, even those without a set group. There are a few things that I think people can do to help on their way to reaching 3K or any goal above that as well. The first thing is persistence. I know this sounds kind of silly, but the more you do something, the better you get at it. Get out there, apply for groups, run your own key. Things will inevitably go wrong. They always do. You will wipe. You will be the one that bricks a key. That's just how it works. The main thing here is to learn from it. Rather than letting this experience put you off actually running keys down the track, look at what went wrong, grow from that, and then move on to the next one. I think we want to try and cultivate a mindset of attempting things, failing, and then learning from the failures, rather than attempting things, failing, and then not attempting that thing again. The second thing is to pug the right way. Now, I know this sounds strange because, pugging is pugging, right? But there are a few things that you can do to increase your chances of success. For the most part, avoid groups where the leader's IO is significantly lower than the level of key that they're listing. These runs often have a fairly low chance of success, the exception potentially being someone who has a low IO but their main score is linked and it's quite high, which is indicating that they are probably a very good player on an alt or another character. When you're inviting people to your own key, just keep an eye out for a couple of red flags. As the season progresses, if you see people that have very few timed keys and the only ones that they've got the keys that are bringing them up to the score that they're at, they probably got that score from boosting. If the player hasn't timed a key at the level that you're attempting to run, probably best to avoid them unless there's other indicators of skill, whether that be really good mythic raid progress or a high score from a previous season or a high main score linked. Just trying to give yourself the best chance of success. And in a key, pretend that everyone is going to mess up mechanics. And then also think about how you can solve that. Outside of comms, it's sort of inevitable that kicks are going to get missed or mechanics are going to get messed up. So you can ask yourself, how can I respond to this on my class? What can I do as a healer if a bolt gets missed? Or what can I do as a DPS to help the healer if bolts get missed? Do I have a cleanse or a decurse? Is there any abilities that I can use that might mitigate damage to sort of help me live through certain things? These are the sorts of things that when you start thinking about them, you'll start to improve at the game and give yourself a much better chance of succeeding in your keys. Lastly, engage with class content. So what I mean by this is find YouTubers or streamers or any form of content that goes over the class that you're playing and presents it in a way that you find enjoyable and educational. So the good thing about this is if you start to immerse yourself in whatever role or spec it is that you're playing, you'll inevitably start to absorb the information presented by these much better players. The thing is that this game is extremely complicated. So instead of trying to learn everything yourself, go to someone who's already really good at it and learn from them. You add all these things together, as well as some time and patience, I think 3K, as well as scores a fair chunk above 3K, are well and truly achievable by basically anybody. Our second question is from Luke B2U. How can I move from a semi-casual 3K player to getting title? At what point of the season does push begin? Post-raid tuning or turbo boost? So this is a great question. I actually made a video about this a few months back. So I will touch on the topic in the same way that I touched on it in that video as well. If you ask me, the most important part about moving from sort of that 3K level to pushing up into the higher ranks of Mythic Plus is actually your network. What I see a lot is a lot of people will sort of want to get into pushing high keys, and what they'll do is they'll send out a couple of BattleNet ads here and there, but they don't do a whole lot to sort of cultivate those friendships. So my practical advice for anyone who's looking to sort of get into like higher end of Mythic Plus is not only to look for players of a similar skill level just while you're playing, you can add them on BNet and all that sort of jazz, but also attempt to continue engaging with people that you identify as being on a similar sort of level. If you get invited to a Discord server, drop back in there a few times and say hi or chill out in comms. I know this is actually kind of hard because like the anxiety of doing this is very difficult. I do understand, but it is a really good thing just to start to be around those environments. If you've got someone on your BNet list, send them a message every now and then. Say, hey, do you want to do this key? Do you want to do that key? Now, not everyone's going to be open to this. Like you'll find 9 out of 10 people just don't want to interact with you past that like initial adding them on BNet sort of thing. But the more you do it, the more you'll start to build up a network around you, and the more you'll be able to push into higher end content as a result. The thing with Mythic Plus is there is an element of skill. You do have to be somewhat proficient at the game, but a lot of the success at a higher level is actually more down to coordination and just raw persistence, which networking with other people and building a community is going to take you so much further than any sort of individual skill growth. The other thing too is that your skill will naturally sort of develop as you play more. So if you're focusing more on your networking, your skill will sort of follow as you go. As for the last part of the question about what time of the season does the push start, normally you could argue that you don't have to do keys until the mid-patch tuning kicks in, which is actually a very fair thing. We'll get a fairly significant power spike down the track. Classes will get moved up and down in terms of where they fit in sort of like the meta ecosystem. Everyone sort of knows that I'm not exactly super fond of the meta, but it does exist. The thing is though, is that while this is true, you can't just start pushing in the last couple of months of the season. I generally would recommend to anybody to pretty much play keys the entire season. While the actual level of key that you time is not going to be particularly important later on, all of the knowledge and the practice that you get early in the season will be the thing that does pay off. So realistically, you don't have to push until later in the season, but I generally think it's a good idea to be at least somewhat seriously pushing if you really do want to move from that sort of 3K level up into the higher end of Mythic Plus. Question 3 was from Elky. It came through on Discord and it went as follows. Do you run any big keys with a disc? If so, how do you utilize pain suppression? Do you grab it on pull? I've generally treated it as holding one charge available for me in case I scuff or butt pull or don't have big mitigation up. Now, I'm a budding tank, so this felt like the perfect opportunity to pose this question to someone who is a lot more experienced. So responding to this today, we have Shawrus, who finished Season 2 of War Within with a Raider IO score of 4010 and a region rank of 3 for tanks on Vengeance Demon Hunter. He's also been a long-term tank main, like consistently pushing the ladder for multiple seasons in a row. I'll leave links in the descriptions to his Twitch and other socials and all that sort of jazz. So Shawrus has said, this will depend on the tank class and dungeon. If we're thinking Floodgate first pull with a VDH, you can technically get away with no pain suppression in the opener, but for consistency, we just used one on the tank first on setup and then a second one after all the DH defensives had been used. So Brand, Fell Devastation, Meta, and then Fell Dev again. This example is straightforward since the DPS and healer aren't in any danger and you don't need to think about a spare pain suppression for them. Some tank classes like Baru or Warrior can probably skip this pain suppression logic on setups and just call for the late pain suppression once all their defensive buttons have been used. I think if a healer is pugging in LFG so there's less coordination and they've got a short CD external, just using it on setups isn't bad, like Druid Ironbark or a disc with 2 charges of pain suppression. I'd probably break the logic of pain suppression on setup if we're thinking Priory first pull, where the tank feels completely safe and the group is in danger from every AoE. There's no one-size-fits-all answer here. It'll probably come from experience in trying out different pulls and watching your tank flop. and your DPS potentially getting destroyed by some AoE. So very comprehensive answer. To boil it down, what I'm reading from what Shawrus has said here is it really depends on the tank that you're playing and the pulls that you're doing. If it's a pull where you're in danger as the tank, or your tank is in the most amount of danger, then rotating the pain suppressions onto them is probably a good idea. If it's a pull where the entire group is in danger, or the DPS and healer are more threatened than the tank, then holding it for them is probably a good idea. However, this does arc back to like what I said before. Practicing and failing is the best way to learn this sort of stuff. You will, if you're playing the tank and you're not sure when to get pain suppression, you'll learn pretty quick because you'll probably die. Alternatively, if you're the healer, you'll watch your tank die. So really good insight from Shawrus, and thank you for providing it as well. Next, a very deep and esoteric question from Holiday AU. At what point does a Mythic Plus dungeon stop being a dungeon and start becoming you? So I would call this effect transcendence. This is where a Mythic Plus dungeon isn't just a hobby, it's the metric that you use to define your entire identity. You time a big key, you're officially a massive Chad, and everyone should respect you. Got a big IO score? Well, that's more important than money and health and basically anything else. Get complimented by a stranger on your tanking? Well, now you're all bricked up. And on the flip side, if you make any mistake, or you haven't kept up with your raid or IO score, your sense of self-worth will plummet into oblivion. As a positive, you will be so enmeshed in the Mythic Plus system that your character will effectively feel like an extension of yourself. You will play at levels beyond anything that you could have ever imagined and obtain fame and glory beyond anything you could possibly expect. People will bow before your feet due to your unparalleled gaming prowess. You'll also live a half-life though, where all of your worldly attachments like relationships and health and well-being will start to fall away into the shadows. If you ask me, it's probably pretty worth it, actually. Lastly, a question that I get all the time is, what is the cool health bar across the top of my screen? Now, this is a weak aura that was provided to me by a friend during Dragonflight, and it no longer exists on WoW. Since I get asked all the time about it and often get asked to share it in-game, I've popped a link in the pinned comment to the file download for the weak aura. There is an alternative option that does exist on WoW at the moment, if you want something that isn't, you know, a random file that you've downloaded off a pinned comment on a YouTube video. If anyone would like their questions featured on the next episode of Bog's Hotline, drop it down below in the comments. No question is off limits. If I can't answer it myself, I will annoy every single WoW gamer who I think can give an adequate answer. Otherwise, that's it for the first episode of the Q&A. Hope you all enjoyed, and until next time, gamers, take care.